Today, I am excited to welcome Dave Gulden to the Limited List podcast. Dave is a certified interventionist, he's a psychotherapist, and he's the owner of a New Hope Recovery Services. So today we're just going to have a conversation about addiction, mental health struggles, how people can take more ownership of their life. So David, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to have this conversation. So can you just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this type of work?
Sure. So as you said, I'm a dual licensed psychotherapist in the state of Florida, and then I hold a bunch of different certifications around substance use disorders, which has been my passion since getting into the field. So I'm a person in long-term recovery, and meaning I've been sober for 18 years this September.
Congrats.
Thanks. And time flies. But along the way, I did know I wanted to be of some use to people, and certainly had a lot of experience in recovery. And so I went and got my master's degree, and really went into the field really with the intention of helping individual people in their own recoveries and change their lives. Mm-hmm. And then by a series of events in that process, I ended up working with families, which I found I really liked, and I had zero interest in that really in the beginning, and it really kind of evolved into the beginning of my career was primarily working in treatment centers. I was a primary therapist and then eventually a clinical director. But about 3/4 of the way in, I really started working with families a lot, and then I started doing clinical intervention work, which is something that they don't really teach it in school. It's not something in my master's program. They barely touched on it. One class session, about 30 seconds, they even mentioned intervention.
Wow.
So I was, the true answer is, I was kind of burning out early in my career, which I actually think is, I have of the theory that that's normal, and that's why there's a lot of internships and these like gatekeeping functions for counselors, because it's a hard job. Mm-hmm. So as I was kind of burning out, meaning I needed to do something different, I kind of looked at a few different trainings and kind of opted to go learn to become an interventionist and get certified in it.
Okay, so your own individual journey is what inspired this path for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's informed by the people that helped me along the way. There's kind of an idea in recovery, I would say informally, but just like to be of service to other people. Mm-hmm. And you have this experience of something that's unique, right? Like, mm-hmm. Being in addiction is, there's a low recovery rate, which is hard to get statistics on it, but it's a unique experience. And so I felt like I'd like to share that with other people or use it as a tool.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So what are the biggest misconceptions that people have about addiction?
Oh, wow. Probably the oldest one is that it's a moral failing or character flaw. I mean, whenever we talk about how to conceptualize addiction or substance use disorder, which is an interchangeable term, you have like the medical model, which was kind of the real beginning of like this something's happening to people's brains. Mm-hmm. and there's something going on that would be like any other relapsing, remitting, potentially fatal disease like cancer.
Okay.
Rather than I'm a bad guy who likes to drink too much and I've ruined my whole life and I'm just a bad person.
Yeah.
Which for a long time in human history, it was really looked at through the lens of spirituality or morality, moreover, that people were just flawed individuals, rather than the way that I've always conceptualized or defined addiction is very simple. It's a maladaptive coping mechanism, mm-hmm. which there are multiple ways, there's multiple types, right? Mm-hmm. From, alcohol to drugs to food to gambling to sex. Mm-hmm. People are, the theory is you're trying to cope with life, and these behaviors give you something typically mm-hmm. in a payoff of neurotransmitters like dopamine.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a deeper rooted issue rather than just an occurrence.
Yeah. The tricky part though is sometimes it's just like it can be the repetitive behavior. Like I think most people that end up on in substance use disorder treatment for a chemical addiction, they like the way it feels, right? Like you like it's not, you don't do it because it doesn't, you know, serve you in that way. Some people have trauma or really identifiable like triggers or things they're trying to not deal with. And then I think sometimes you just are maybe a hard drinker and you drink for a long time, then you start to have problems, and then maybe you deal with them, you know, to the extent of addiction or cross the line, people say. But then they cause big issues. So I think no matter what, there's probably some big issues to get dealt with.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
What are some early warning signs of addiction?
Oh, wow. Great question. So when I work with families, typically by the time they make it to me for an intervention, it's like well established, right? Like, so I would look at, I do think that there are predictors of nurture and nature. So people who end up in treatment for substance use often have family histories. So I think it's good to be cognizant of like the genetic component. Now they've not worked out the genome and said, here is the addiction gene. But if you look at different cultures and ethnicities in the world, they like different types of people respond differently to alcohol. Like there's the Asian flush reflex. I might be getting that wrong, but this is it's a gene basically where people of Asian descent will drink alcohol and they get red flushed.
Interesting.
And then historically, the Native American people, like as a people, as a race or an ethnicity, they weren't Western or Eastern Europeans who had been exposed to alcohol for generations, and it decimated the Native American population, meaning alcohol, because the effects were so strong. You figure if you've got generations of, let's just say, a German family from, you know, the 1400s, and everybody drinks some amount of beer, and if you've ever been to Germany, that's a thing. You like anything else, you kind of change the genetic code. And I think there are I can't remember, there is a gene that they've identified that I think I have to get back to you on it. It's fascinating. It's like if you have this gene, you're less likely to like exhibit signs of hangovers and stuff. And it's like a recessive gene that's found in Western Europeans, which would make sense because of the amount of time these people have been drinking. So I think it's good to know your history, right? So you know, I might have a brain that might be more predisposed to drinking, which if you ask people in recovery, like to talk about their experience, there's varied experiences. Like some people can drink a lot right out of the gate, and some people, you know, take a certain drug that makes other people tired and they're not. And I do think that goes back to our own kind of genetics and our brain makeup. We're all different.
Yeah.
So the biological, like a history, a family history. And then as far as acute signs, like I have a family member, the thing I would say warning signs are something feels off. Like your gut and your intuition. Like if you have a family member who is exhibiting some behavior that doesn't make sense, I always tell my clients to really listen to that, because you know the person, right? You know them much better than any therapist or interventionist. So, like, again, if there's smoke, there's fire often. But I would say anything, and then there's the basics of like lying or money's disappearing, or they're altered, or they're not remembering something, they're stealing, there's like you know, really perceptible like change in behavior. Like my you know, my daughter's really outgoing now, she's shut in like overnight, you know, seemingly overnight, or someone who's really calm who will have outbursts in rage. It's just something to look at. Are they using substances? Are they you know, is that going on?
Yeah. Why do you think people wait for a crisis to happen before seeking help?
Wow, it's a great question. I mean, I would think, you know, I think it varies from like, it's just you don't want to believe the thing.
Yeah.
It's like if you had something happen, like you got a diagnosis of a medical issue, you're like in disbelief. I think most people most families I deal with, like there's no rule book for how to deal with like the addiction. Often, people wait till crisis because, let's just say, with a chemical substance use disorder, the user or the identified patient or whatever you want to call it, they hide it, right? Like they realize, oh, I got drunk and I got in trouble, so now I have to be careful not to show that. And then crisis comes down the line, and nobody has an idea this person's hiding their drinking or whatever it is. So I think it's I don't think people are waiting for it as much as they find themselves in a situation where they're in crisis, which just moves the everybody's got to do something. You have to get action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So what are the biggest mistakes that families make before an intervention happens?
It's a really good question. I would say, and again, I know what you mean. I think they're just natural, organic processes, right? Like you try to help your family member or your friend to the best of your ability. And so I think they're not mistakes as much as they are like just what people do, right? Because there's no rule book. But I would say like confronting someone, most people think if I just show this person what they're doing or that I know that they're doing something, that they're going to have this epiphany and change their behavior. And I wish it were that easy. I wish it were that easy with your 2-year-old or your 5-year-old who doesn't have a substance use disorder. When you're dealing with someone with an addiction, really, when you're looking at the medical model, the idea is, or conceptually, this person's rewired their brain. So they're really not operating from their prefrontal cortex all the time. So they're really midbrain driven, which is a lot of feeling. On one hand, you got to know what you're dealing with, meaning you got to know, but I would say the mistake is not just talking about it sooner if you can. And I think people don't know how to do it. They don't know, how do I talk to this person? Or I do, and they tell me everything's fine, and I believe them because they're my kid and they don't lie to me.
Yeah. And
then maybe over time, it just becomes normalized, whatever the behavior is. So I'll piggyback on the fact of like enabling is a term that you hear often in addiction. Now, it's got a negative connotation for good reason. I don't see it that way at all. I just think it's a symptom of the problem. Often people will see a scenario that looks like this. Husband is buying a bottle of vodka every 2 days for wife, and she drinks at home, and she's an alcoholic. And people come in and look at him and go, he's a predator. He's he's enabling this woman. How could you do that? You're keeping her drunk. Well, then you go back a year and a half prior to that, and husband comes home and wife is getting back in the car, blackout drunk, and he's trying to stop her and she's going to get more booze, and he takes the keys, says, I'll go get you more, right? Just because in that moment, he's not going to do an intervention. He's not going to take her to treatment. He's going to just triage his problem. So he goes and he buys alcohol. And then a couple days later, he makes a deal with her because he doesn't know what to do. And I'll just get you alcohol. And then a year and a half later, because it's an impossible, unsustainable situation, that becomes normal. And often you find that the way a family system is operating right before an intervention, there's a lot of things that are been normalized that couldn't have happened on day one because they would have been insane. But over time, it just becomes, you get used to it, and then people are living in a life they don't know how they got there. Everybody who's involved. So enabling is a manifestation, or it's a symptom of the problem, but I think it's normal. It's an organic process.
Okay.
So again, often people have shame, like I'm contributing to this problem. I mean, in systems theory, which is we look at every family as an dependent system. When you have addiction, it affects all parts of it. So it's not like it's just this person's fault. It doesn't even matter whose fault it is, if you could even pinpoint it. It's just everything's affected. So in an intervention, what you're doing is the system around the person, the identified patient, the identified loved one, they change first. They say, we're not doing this anymore. Here's what we need this person to do for themselves, for that person, but for the system in the whole. The whole system. So
drinking's like a coping mechanism, essentially.
Yeah, that's one, for sure. That's how I've always looked at it. That person is coping with either just daily life or big trauma, or it doesn't even matter. They're just what's probably more important is if you are, let's say you're an alcoholic, and which again is an old term. I would say by the time you've reached that point and you are clinically, diagnosed as alcohol use disorder, severe presentation or mild presentation, you're not utilizing coping mechanisms because you're drinking. Therefore, the way that you would cope with life normally is like they're like atrophied muscles. So like I used to deal with sadness this way, and I used to go take a walk, or I do this, or I talk to someone. Well, if I drink instead of doing that, then I'm like less able to cope without drinking more and more. Hence the problem gets bigger. And I think it ends up with you deal with everything happy, sad, glad, bored, scared with drinking.
Yep.
Yeah.
Interesting. So how could people find healthier coping mechanisms?
Wow. So, I mean, that is I think everybody's different, right? And so in treatment for substance use disorder, there's a lot of focus on this. This is also common with other mental health disorders, like for some personality disorders, where you want to really focus on how to deal with strong feelings. Which you have in recovery from substances in the beginning, but also you're trying to deal with like the craving to drink or the pull towards, I don't want to feel this stuff. The atrophied muscle, I think, has always really worked. If anybody's ever been to the gym, when you haven't gone for a while, if you go and you maybe lift half as much weight, then you're so sore. Well, it's because those muscles haven't been used in a while. I think, some people never have healthy coping mechanisms. They might go from one to the other until they hit a crisis. But as far as finding them, I think there's a bunch of a lot of what we work with psychological issues or diseases of the mind, which addiction would be one of, is like things around grounding techniques. So I can like kind of cut off like how my brain might be triggering or upsetting my body. So there's a whole bunch of different grounding techniques, from meditation to thought stopping to you Google it, you'll get a plethora of them, and just finding some stuff that works for you. And now again, that could be taking a walk, it could be playing your drums, it could be calling someone and sharing the problem, calling someone and asking them to share their problems with you.
True.
Getting out of yourself. But I think we have different personalities, so some of us are more inclined to do things individually or in groups or what have you. So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Have you ever witnessed, you don't have to name names, but someone who profoundly turned their life around when everyone thought it was impossible?
Yeah. I wouldn't say all the time, but many, many times. And it's
wow.
It's remarkable because again, I don't have the purported rates of recovery, but they're traditionally statistically low. Here's the truth. I've never seen a study that has a real number because people in substance use treatment recovery, they're hard to track. If you factor in some people come through Alcoholics Anonymous, they're not going to let you get in there and track these people for 5 years to do over 10 years. Are they still sober? So it's hard to really say this is the outcome of like treatment, even what that means. That could be AA or treatment or the church or just people that stop drinking one day because they have a religious experience. My point being, people transform their lives. I think the further people go down, if they can get sober, they have like massive transformations, And so I've seen so I would say most people that have really come through it, they're all amazing. Transformations. I've been around long enough in this capacity as a clinician to now see it for myself, whereas I was around people that were either before or after me in my own personal recovery. It's hard to see it there, but if it's someone like I've had patients that I still see today who are 6 or 7 years sober. One's 9 years sober, which is wild, and I won't this wouldn't break HIPAA or anything, but I had a patient reach out to me because this person is in graduate school, and they wrote me a letter which was beyond I was really moving, just about their experience in 2014 when they were a patient of mine. and this is like my first job too, and how that whole experience had affected them to the point that they wanted to go become a therapist, and here we are 12 years later and they're still sober. It's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So would the definition of recovery for you be that someone's sober? Or what does that look like?
It's a great question. Really, I would say recovery is the process. Now, there are a bunch of camps here, like there's different, like in the 12-step world of the, and there's a bunch of different 12-step programs, Alcoholics Anonymous being the first one. Different views on what would be sober, right? There are people for sure that I would say are they're in a recovery program. They might have not had a drink in 5 years and they still might smoke cigarettes or vape. So it's like an addictive. Now, I would say specifically, I would say clinically impacting you. And what I mean is, I think you can die from cigarettes, but it's not like you're losing your family because you're like acting out or displaying the same behaviors as like a more traditional addiction. You know what I mean? Like, I think the impact on your like your functioning isn't the same as it would be if you're a heroin addict. So recovery would be the process. But I think that's it's challenging when you have process disorders like sex addiction is not a diagnosis in the DSM-5. It was gonna be. This is what they told me when I was in graduate school, and they pulled it because they couldn't like say this is what defines a sex addict. Because you have someone who might be exposing themselves on the street corners to people walking by, and then someone over here who might be compulsively seeing prostitutes. Like, this person never touches anybody. This person might be engaging on this high-risk behavior. So they pulled it, and which is an awful thing in my opinion, because then you're never going to get treatment for that because there's no real diagnosis. But sex is a thing that people don't, generally it is a part of being human. So it's something that people might say, well, you just don't have sex. Well, that would be like saying don't eat food.
And that leads to my next question. Is food an addiction?
100%. Now, I have my own thoughts on like sugar, and I love it. Don't get me wrong. Like, I wish it's probably the last thing I hold on to that's not good for me. And I knew a therapist used to say if sugar was invented today, they would schedule it like a drug, like schedule. Because it's, if you look at the correlation between a lot of medical issues, it's right there. The Western diet and things like that. And for heart disease and diabetes, diabetes is pretty much linked to this. Now, and I think you can absolutely use food as a coping mechanism, and I think it's probably the most underreported, like, classified addiction in our country, because we have obesity rates, and that's not normal behavior. Meaning, I think there is a payoff of neurotransmitters. Chocolate is great, and eating that stuff will make you feel good, and I think when it's a compulsive thing, and again, it's I think food, absolutely. To my knowledge, I don't think there's a diagnosis for overeating. And if there's not, I can't imagine there wouldn't be. There's certainly your eating disorders, which would be more of the binging and purging of bulimia, or anorexia, which I actually don't like. They probably have different names for those now as far as disordered eating, but in my mind, there's the same thing as addiction. There's a lot of crossover in the behaviors around them and the resistance to change.
Okay. So what should someone do if they suspect that a family member or a friend or a loved one is going through addiction? What's the first step in that? Is it seeking help? Where's the help?
That's great. I do think informing yourself on, like, knowing what it is that you're looking for. So there are therapists is a good place to look. There's a lot of information that will point you in different kind of avenues of support and help. Again, I do intervention work because often you'll find that the problem's so big that, like, a conversation is not going to help it. This person is in crisis and they're not going to stop because they've rewired their brain, and you've got to do something, and it's got to be something that's like any intervention that I do, and when I work with a family, the person going to treatment has to meet criteria for residential or above, which would be detox, because it's a lot, is a very there's a lot that goes into it, and so like if you came to me and said I want to do an intervention, I want my family member to go to outpatient, I will say to the person, just ask them to. Like if it's enough of something you can talk about, tell them you want them to go to outpatient, and you don't want them to use, because we're going to do an intervention when maybe you've tried that and they told you to kick rocks, or they said they were going, they were lying about it, still drinking. A lot of the kind of maladaptive behaviors of addiction, when they're present, the lying or the subterfuge or sneaking or a manipulation, but also I see this more often than not, is like not everybody in a family system has the same information. And when you get them all together, they're like, oh yeah, I know that. And like what you realize is the person who's not a bad person, they have a drug or alcohol problem, they realize they can't give it, like they have to kind of like, they have to keep everybody out of the loop. And that's so the addiction can survive. So in the beginning, like before any recovery, it'd be good to have a conversation with your family about it. Now, sometimes that can evolve into like a pseudo family intervention, and I just caution people on doing that sometimes, but for a multitude of reasons, just because y'all have to, I think that the family has to agree on the problem, the nature of it, and the solution if you're going to ask someone or try to get someone to do something. Because if there's a chink in that, it'll be exploited by the disease, is how I would put it.
So how could family members protect their own mental health when trying to help another in their family?
Great. So there are programs like Al-Anon or Nar-Anon, which are for the family members of substance users. And these are programs that came along their 12-step programs, just like AA. And Al-Anon was created by one of the co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous' wife, because the families needed help too. And so there are mutual help group programs and support groups out there. Getting going to an addictions therapist for yourself versus your loved one, because like I treat families I treat the spouses of people that I've taken to treatment, because I know what they're dealing with on that end, because it's a unique situation. And so just getting your own help, because you might not have caused this issue, but you're affected by it.
What about advice for people who feel responsible for saving another person?
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard thing, especially I don't think it's always exclusive to like parents and children. That's a hard one though, or your family, right? Like I've certainly done interventions where there are friends who hire me to help a friend, right? There's no family involved. But I think I would tell a family this: if you are trying to save someone, I would look at it like they have a brain tumor. Because what are you going to do about that? You're not going to convince them that they don't have one. You're not going to operate on them. You're not the treat. And so I think there's a lot of a crossover in looking at an addiction like that, because you have this almost intrusion into the brain, and it's changing who they are, and they need real treatment for it, which I'm not an oncologist, nor would I operate on my loved one's brain. They need to go somewhere and get help by people who are professionals in the setting that's appropriate, and so on and so forth. And then you can help them by doing everything you can to kind of get them there within reason, right? Like, and then working on yourself so you're the healthiest version of yourself. Because when I said the family system, if there's addiction in it, everybody's going to suffer, like on some level, or they're affected by it. So if everybody got healthy and the substance user didn't change, it will change the system.
Interesting.
It's just most people think I'm going to get my person sober and everything will be better.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, because it seems like a very clear, identifiable source of the problem. I wish it were that easy. I really do. It's just most, I would say most families have stuff in them to some degree, meaning some dysfunction or issues. That's life. That's being a human.
Yeah.
And so if usually if there's an addiction, it didn't get there overnight. And so it's not, and again, I really, I think the misnomer is to blame any part of it, right? I think everybody has to take responsibility if they can for their behavior.
True.
And then that would mean their motivation to change, or the behavior to change a problem.
So what exactly happens during an intervention?
I get brought into an intervention after there's evidence to support that a person is impaired by substances, sometimes mental health, or behavioral addiction. So they're meeting a level that they require treatment. So I get together, I assemble a team to help that person. The intervention team, which could be upwards 8 people. I've done it with just one person, like me and one person. I work with that family or that system for anywhere up to like 25 hours, depending on the case. Train them, and then simultaneously I identify where this person, 3 options for treatment for this person to go to residential or detox in residential with chemicals. And then I just say I remove barriers to them saying yes. So I learn everything I can about their life within reason from the people closest to them. So I can do 2 things. One, anticipate to a certain degree what they're going to use as a reason not to go. Because the assumption is if they were going to go, they would have gone by now.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're at that level of crisis. There's consequences that I learn about. So like my first call with a caller to determine if I'm going to work with them is I'm vetting them as much as they're vetting me. Like, is this an appropriate, ethically for this higher level of care? So work with the family. I learn all about the identified loved one from the eyes of their family before I ever meet them. Train up those folks, and then we pick a time and a place to meet with that person prior to which is the intervention, as most people would know it. And then prior to that, the team and I get together without that person, and we go over kind of like how it's going to go, like a last minute or not last minute, but a pre-intervention meeting. And then depending on the case or like the situation, we either surprise that person, which could come in a bunch of different ways. They walk into a room and their whole family is there, and we're basically in an intervention at that point, and or we do an invitational, which is we do all the same work, we just kind of like mitigate, or we don't really surprise them. We tell them they're coming in to do something. It just depends on the situation as to why we would do one or the other.
Can someone ever recover if they don't believe they have a problem?
I think it's pretty hard, meaning I think you have to, I would say that I've not known someone to recover. And let's just say we use recover as like, if you are diagnosed with a substance use disorder, 365 days later, if you have not taken a drink and you are at alcohol use disorder, moderate presentation, 365 days later, if you just hadn't drank, you could have done it in jail. You're in sustained remission, which would be like cancer diagnosis. It's I have a disease and it's not active. At 90 days, you're in early remission. I would say that to get that far, unless you were in a situation where like you really could not access the substance, I think you probably accepted the fact that you have a problem to the degree that you have used whatever or surrendered, or however you want to put it, that you can't do it.
So there needs to be a level of accountability.
Yeah, I mean, one way I've always thought about, or it was taught to me, is you have a disease that tells you don't have a disease, which is very common. And that's when you hear about the denial system of someone with a substance use disorder. It's real. And I've always thought it made sense that like, if you rewire this part of your brain where your fight and flight and drives for food and things like that, this part of your brain that's Claudia, that loves and has feeling, or can discern feeling and can have relationships, is much smaller and not as strong as this part of the brain. And I feel like the denial system is a way that we don't, or a person doesn't just go crazy, right? Like they make excuses for the insanity of their brain disease. So these fighting parts of your brain, this part is going to win a majority of the time. So when we look at what happens in recovery is we're wanting to take away the substance and really kind of work on ways to strengthen that brain so it heals. And that's um so an acceptance of the problem is just an integral part of that.
So what gives you hope when you're dealing with people in their darkest moments?
I have either a low bar for hope. My thought is anybody can get sober if they're still breathing and they're able to get there. I've seen it. I've seen people that look like they're never gonna get it.
Wow.
And then I've seen people the opposite where they look like they're gonna get it and they could do it.
Wow.
Yeah. So I just have hope because I love what I do for that reason, because when I work with a family, I've had one person not go to treatment ever as a result of an intervention.
Wow.
And so the majority of them go the day of the intervention. And sometimes we plan for them to go later, or there's some reasons why it's worth it. But one thing is when I'm waiting for someone to walk in the door and their whole life's going to change potentially, for sure the people in that room, it's changing for them. I'll say to people, it's going to be different after this, because the system in an intervention is taking a stand per se, and it's really important because this person's life's on the line and everybody's affected, and again I think there's a lot of hope in that. Sometimes the person doesn't make it, but the family gets better, which is sad, but it still gives me hope, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I deal in hope, so I just think that you can have it,
Yeah. How do you protect your own mental health then?
Wow. So that is the grind of it, right? The longer I've been in this field, the longer I've been in this field, the less able I am to see my own burnout these days.
Huh.
So it's working your own program. I still go to therapy. I believe in therapy,
Mm-hmm.
and so I work my own personal recovery program. Stay active. For me, exercise is a big way of cope, or to stay mentally fresh. And just doing what works to stay sober.
Okay.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, my last question. So if someone listening feels stuck, overwhelmed, or hopeless today, what would you want them to hear?
Oh, I would say regardless of why, right? Meaning they're drinking too much or they're depressed and they're suicide. I don't know. Feelings are not facts. And what we feel and a lot of what we think, right? We have very little control over, because if we did, none of us would ever be sad. I would never choose to be sad or really upset. They come, they're strong, and often we believe that if I feel this thing, this is reality. I've never seen it as much with people with clinical depression or major depressive disorder. They are very often concrete in how they think about things. They'll feel like nobody loves them, and you could bring 10 people that will swear that they love them,
Mm-hmm.
and the person feels it, so it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Which can be really dangerous, right? Or same with things around trauma or shame. It's you might feel hopeless. That is something that is a feeling, and I believe if you can, often you have to act your way out of the feeling versus think your way out of the feeling. So if someone's feeling something, first of all, gratitude
Mm-hmm.
is the antidote for, in my opinion, that negative kind of view, or the darkness. Often we're doing better than we think. Don't get me wrong. I think contemporary society, from how we kind of look at the individual and the ideas of the aspirations that we, whether it's money or to look this way or things on social media, they allow for a lot of us to really feel bad about ourselves, and so I think getting grounded with the people closest to you, or finding meaning in your life, is the ultimate goal, which is not easy in itself at all. So I just think Don't always believe what you feel in that regard. And then you got to share it with someone, like get it with someone who can hear it, even if it's some person on a hotline that you don't know that person.
988.
What's that?
988.
988, yeah, for sure. And then just to know that, like, I think when people are in a dark place, they feel alone, and that's just not the case. Like, one of the reasons there's these huge recovering communities. So AA is a good example where you have like people that go for 50 years or 30 years. And often an observer will say, I can't believe you still go to AA. Do you still want to drink every day? And the person will say, I haven't wanted to drink in 30 years. No, why do you go? Well, for a multitude of reasons. One is like to give back to others coming in the door, and like, because that person comes in and they feel like they're experiencing something nobody's ever experienced, and they might feel like the worst person on earth. And then you hear that like there's a room full of people that got better. There's a lot, and they share with you what it was like, and you can look at them and you tell, oh, this person knows what it's like. That's hope. There's from counseling programs, there's the curative factors, Yalom's curative factors for groups, and they're like universality, which is one of them. Like, I'm not alone. Like, this happens. Or installation of hope. Like, I want this thing, and I see this person who's ahead of me that got it, and like it can happen for me. Whereas if I'm sitting on my couch feeling bad for myself, alone with my thoughts, I'm behind enemy lines. Like, I mean, if you try to think your way out of it, it's really, in my experience, doesn't ever work. It makes you feel worse. So I would say more than anything, to break out of some negative thought pattern, you got to disrupt it. And if you're feeling it some way, do everything you can to get out of your head. Not numb out your pain with or your feelings with drugs or alcohol or something. Like talking to someone, a problem shared is often a problem cut in half. So finding community support from your family, support from wherever you can find it.
Thank you, Dave.
Absolutely.
This was so wonderful.
Yeah.
You've shared so much valuable information. I really appreciate you sharing your story as well.
Happy to.